I wanted to find a way in my own way to honor Dr. Scott Morgan. And the way I can do that, my medium to do that would be through Monday Science, and give you a bit of background about who this incredible person was. And then afterwards, I'll replay the episode, which was first aired on the 31st of August 2020.
Science. Technology. Medicine. Health. These four things make the world go round. Without them, we couldn't exist. This is the Monday Science Podcast, a weekly show bringing you the latest research and news in science, technology, medicine, and health, answering your questions or finding experts in the field to answer them. Your host is a pharmacist, an award-winning scientist. She leads her own research group and is the founder of King's College London Fight the Fakes. A tad bit on the qualified side. Welcome to Monday Science. Here's your host, Dr. Bahijja Raimi Abraham.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good day. Welcome back to Monday Science. I am your host, as the intro has already told you, Dr. Bahijja Raimi Abraham. So today's episode, as you would see from the title, is a little bit of a sad one. It's in memory of somebody called Dr. Peter B. Scott Morgan. Now, I discovered Dr. Scott Morgan in 2020. Do we call it 2020? Wow, I couldn't say that. I discovered him in 2020, where I watched a documentary that was on Channel 4. Channel 4 is one of the channels in the UK, and it was called Peter, the Human Cyborg. And it inspired me to do a review on Monday Science, which is actually going to be replayed in this episode. And I just was fascinated by him. I was fascinated by his story, and found him as a person to be quite a motivation. Just really amazing what he's done. So unfortunately, on the 15th of June, a message was put on his Twitter, which read, "To Peter's amazing rebel supporters, with a broken heart, I'm letting you all know that Peter passed peacefully surrounded by his family and those closest to him. He was incredibly proud of all of you who supported him and his vision of changing the way people see disability." I was very, very sad to hear of his passing, and I felt it was only right. And well, maybe I shouldn't even say only right. I wanted to find a way in my own way to honor Dr. Scott Morgan. And the way I can do that, my medium to do that would be through Monday Science as well. So I just want to give you a bit of background about who this incredible person was. And then afterwards, I'll replay the episode, which was first aired on the 31st of August 2020, as a review of the Channel 4 documentary. And then I also provided some context and background about the human cyborg concept. And then around that time, there was a lot of buzz around Neuralink, which was or is still a company, but it's Elon Musk's neurotechnology company that was and still is developing implantable brain machine interfaces. So, about Dr. Peter Scott Morgan. So, he was an English scientist, and he is known as the world's first human cyborg. He passed away on the 15th of June. He passed away at the age of 64. Dr. Scott Morgan had a BSc in computing science and a PhD, which he obtained in 1986 from Imperial College London, which was the first doctorate awarded by a robotics department in a British university. So already he was just a trailblazer. His thesis was a technical and managerial methodology for robotization, an approach to cost-effective introduction of robotics technology into industry with particular reference to flexible assembly systems. After Dr. Scott Morgan was diagnosed with amyotrophic lateral sclerosis in 2017, he underwent a series of operations which allowed him to control through technological innovation the muscles and organs which were wasting away as a result of the condition. He adopted procedures using technology to bypass his natural body systems and also developed an avatar of his face to allow him to indicate a range of expressions. He became able to operate a computer using an eye tracking technology and stand up using his wheelchair and demonstrate emotions through the avatar that he used. And this is all documented. The transformations are all documented in the Channel 4 documentary Peter, the Human Cyborg, which came out, as I mentioned, in 2020. I'll put a link of that in the bio. I hope it's still available. He also wrote a book about the experience, Peter 2.0. So, what inspired me so much about Dr. Scott Morgan was the fact that he used, I often talk a lot about, well, I don't know if I've talked about it on the podcast, but I do talk a lot to people about the privilege of being a scientist, being in STEM, and having, this ability to say, this is something I'm researching and I want to make a difference in whatever way. But what I found particularly touching about Dr. Scott Morgan was the fact that he used his expertise and his research and his understanding of robotics to help him, but also not just him, but help other people with how he was able to combine technology and technological innovation to allow him to do so many things that before him seemed impossible. So yeah, I was really, really touched by his passing. And I feel like we're going to see more of see more of the impact his innovation has had in his condition, in other disabilities as well, maybe more specifically in ALS as well. So I just feel like, I just want to honor him in my own way through this episode. So the original episode, as I mentioned, this was episode 16, first aired 31st of August 2020. And I hope you enjoy it. I hope you find it informative, but more importantly, I hope it gives a little flavor and context and background to Dr. Scott Morgan. I'm going to put links to his foundation, the Scott Morgan Foundation, where their mission is changing what it means to be human. So this is going to be in the episode description. There's apparently a film as well coming up, which will be based on the true story of his life. So yeah, please enjoy today's episode. Thank you. So yeah, I hope you enjoy the episode. Hello and welcome back to Monday Science. We are on episode 16. Very excited that we've made it to episode 16. Today's episode is going to be a little bit different. It's a review of a documentary which was on Channel 4. This is Channel 4 in the UK. The name of the documentary is Peter, the Human Cyborg. Before I get into it, I'd intended to do a review on the Netflix series Unwell. However, this week there was a documentary on Channel 4 in the UK and it was called Peter, the Human Cyborg. And I just got so into it. It's a fantastic documentary. Before we get into it, let me get some of the definitions out of the way. So you've probably heard this term cyborg and you've heard, well, I don't know, you may have heard the word cyborg before. So cyborg is a blending of the words cybernetic organisms, right? So cyborg, cybernetics. Cybernetics is the science of communication and automatic control systems in both machines and living things. And therefore, a cyborg is a being with both organic and mechatronic body parts. That term biomechatronic is the integration of biology and mechatronics is electrical, electronics, and mechanical engineering combined into one. A cyborg is a being, this is the official definition, it's a being with both organic and biomechatronic body parts, right? So I've been quite fascinated by cyborgs and cyborg technology from quite young. And because the term cyborgs, you've always heard about it in sci-fi films, in sci-fi series, or when you read various different comics, isn't there? I think there's a DC comic character called Cyborg. If anybody watches Doom Patrol, there's a character there that's from DC Comics. As a child, I've always been fascinated by the books, but what's been interesting getting older is that you actually see the crossover from fantasy to reality in this area of cyborgs, which has been happening over the past few decades. There is actually something called called Cyborg Art, which is also known as cyborgism. And I learnt about cyborgism or cyborg art around 2015, and this is when I started my social enterprise called STEAM Ed Collective. And the whole aim of STEAM Ed Collective was to engage the general public with STEM, so science, technology, engineering, and maths research, so STEM research, through that with a particular focus on public art and street art. And the concept of STEAM is where you include the art, so that's where the A comes in. With the social enterprise, it was really all about understanding how the two worlds of STEM and art combine, so you get this STEAM interdisciplinary. And around that time is when I became interested in a condition called synesthesia. Synesthesia is a condition in which one sense, so for example hearing, is simultaneously perceived as if by one or more additional senses such as sight. So for example, somebody with synesthesia may hear sounds whilst also seeing them as colourful swirls. Another form of synesthesia could be joining objects such as letters, shapes and numbers, or people's names with a sensory perception of smell, colour or flavour. The condition isn't fully understood. It is thought to be genetic. And what I found fascinating at the time and still do is the fact that the condition is believed to be more prevalent in artists, writers and musicians. So for example, the musician and also producer Pharrell Williams, he has synesthesia, so he sees sound to colour. His is sound to colour. And a whole load of famous people, famous artists, writers and musicians, so Jimi Hendrix, Marilyn Monroe, Tilda Swinton, hers is very interesting. She has a word taste association. So when she says a word, it's associated with a taste for her. Stevie Wonder has also been reported to have a sound color synthesis. Zimmerman, the famous composer, he's composed soundtracks for Man of Steel, he's amazing, and Mary J. Blige. I've attached a TED talk in the description that explains it further. And so I'd come across an artist called Neil Harbor, who is a cyborg artist and an activist for trans species rights. And he is best known for being the first person in the world with an antennae implanted in his skull. And he's also the world's first legally recognized cyborg. So he's had this antenna implanted into his skull, which gives him access to something he was born without, which is the ability to perceive color. Harbison was diagnosed with achromatopsia, which is complete color blindness. And in 2004, he developed a technology to provide him with a sensory experience that no human had ever been able to have. And so he was studying experimental music production at College of Arts in Devon. And for his final year project, he collaborated with a computer scientist, and they developed the first version of something that's called iBorg. iBorg was like the first prototype of this antennae, which was attached to a computer and then a pair of headphones and a webcam at the end of the antennae, which translated each color into different sound waves. It was 360 different sound waves actually. And then Harbison would be able to listen to the sound waves through the headphones. And with this, Harbison's condition was different because he no longer had total blindness, but now with the antennae, he had something called chromatopsia, which is an extra sense that connects colors with sound. Unlike thea, which can vary from person to person, chromatopsia makes each color correspond to a specific sound. And the device that was created, the iBorg, unfortunately it did have some side effects, mainly headache. What's just so fascinating with his journey was that he went from, Neil Harbison, the artist, he went from being completely colorblind to then being able to decipher colors such as red, blue and green. And then to push it even further, he's able to detect colors outside of the spectrum of human vision, such as infrared and ultraviolet. So as I mentioned earlier, Harbison, he holds the distinction of being the first human cyborg to be legally recognized by a government, because the photo on his passport shows him wearing his device, so it's part of who he is. The interesting thing is that he said that getting used to the new technology was easy, but getting acceptance from other people for who he was with this antennae being part of him and effectively being a cyborg, it was a challenge. It was a challenge for people to accept him as he was. In an effort to try and address some of these issues, in 2010, he co-founded the Cyborg Foundation with his friend Moon. One of the ways in which the foundation is trying to show people what it's like to be a cyborg is through their app. It's called iBorg app. It's only available on Android, soon to be coming to Apple apparently. And what this does is through the app, you can translate colors into sound frequencies, so you can experience what Neil Harbison experiences with his antennae. Before I go into the review, I just want to talk a little bit about Peter. So just as a reminder, the documentary is on Channel 4 and it's called Peter, the Human Cyborg. So Peter is actually Dr. Peter Scott Morgan, and he's a roboticist. He earned the first ever PhD granted by a robotics facility from the UK, and this was at Imperial College of Science science, technology, and medicine. He is the foremost authority on the unwritten rules that organizations, social groups, cultures, and global systems follow that dictate how they will evolve. In 2017, Peter was diagnosed with motor neuron and was given only 2 years to live. Motor neuron disease describes a group of diseases that affect the nerves, so the motor neurons in the brain and the spinal cord which tells the muscles what to do. It's nearly always fatal, but some people can live with it for many years. With motor neuron disease, messages from the motor neurons gradually stop reaching the muscles, and this leads the muscles to weaken, stiffen, and waste. Motor neuron disease, this can affect how somebody can walk, talk, drink, and even breathe. And some people also experiences changes to their thinking and behavior. However, motor neuron disease affects everybody differently. Not all symptoms will affect everyone or in the same order. And symptoms also progress at a varying speed, which this is one of the key difficulties. It does make it very difficult for a person living with motor neuron, as well as the healthcare professionals and so forth. It makes it difficult for them to predict progression of the disease. Motor neuron disease is life-shortening, unfortunately, and there is no cure. Although the disease will progress, symptoms can be managed to achieve the best possible quality of life. And there is a 1 in 300 chance of getting motor neuron disease across a life. So just to clarify one point, in the UK, we tend to use the motor neuron disease. In America, they use the term amyotrophic sclerosis, so ALS. I don't know if you'd remember the Ice Bucket Challenge, which was to increase awareness and raise money about motor neuron disease, so ALS. So if we go back to Dr. Peter Scott Morgan, what has been amazing about Peter is that when he was given his diagnosis, he didn't see it as a setback, but instead he saw this as an unrepeatable opportunity to conduct some breakthrough research using his expertise in robotics, as well as being somebody living with motor neuron disease, to ensure that the lessons learned could help everybody with extreme disability. He's absolutely amazing and he's fantastic. Peter was diagnosed with motor neuron disease. He immediately set about organizing something called the Radical Disability. And just to highlight that the word ability is in capitals. So the Radical Disability Project, to research revolutionary high-tech approaches to dramatically improve the quality of life of people with disability. The Channel 4 documentary follows his journey to overcome motor neuron disease using a combination of robotics, artificial intelligence, and surgery. The program is filmed over approximately 2 years and into 2020. So I believe the latest time point was maybe around March of this year. I just can't remember fully. It's a fascinating documentary. It's fascinating learning about the disease, seeing how Peter lives with it. And it follows Peter and his partner's journey, searching and finding the right people and technologies to help him and to help both of them really achieve his goal. The documentary gives amazing insight into how technology can improve lives. And what I was amazed about for me was seeing how Peter used his research, his own expertise and understanding, and his unshaken belief in science and technology, mainly even technology. He just has such a strong belief that technology would have the answers to solve the problems that he'd identified. The other thing as well is that with this belief, so combining his experience as somebody living with motor neuron disease, his research, his years of research and understanding into robotics and other technology and other areas of technology, his unshaken belief in science and tech, and he was combining all of this to not just try and improve his life, but with the view that by using himself as the guinea pig, as using himself as the experiment, it will have better outcomes for other people living with motor neuron disease or other conditions which have the debilitating or a disabling effect. I don't want to give too much away because there are lots of it's just a fantastic documentary. It's well put together, but on top of that, just seeing the journey and seeing how he uses his expertise, uses his knowledge, and then also the experts that he engages with, and taking on board the learning and experiences of previous people who have lived with motor neuron disease and the technology that's been used with them, and applying that to what Peter's vision is of how he would want to live with motor neuron disease, and as the title says, becoming a human cyborg. In the episode with motor neuron disease, messages from the motor neurons gradually stop reaching the muscles, so this leads to muscle weakness, stiffness, and waste, and it can affect how a person can walk, talk, eat, drink, and breathe. And one of the things that happens over the course of the documentary that you see over the last 2 years is that Peter's ability to eat and to drink is affected. Because of that, he has to at some point consider having surgery that will prevent him from being able to speak. speak in a normal way. This is where the cyborg side of things would come in. And it was a combination of emotional to watch, interesting from a scientific and technology perspective, is seeing the conversations about the development or how his is going to sound, or what his cyborg voice is going to sound like, and how similar it is or isn't to his biological voice. I don't want to give too much away. I know I keep saying that, but I really don't. And there's something that he has to consider in order for him to achieve likeness of his cyborg voice to his biological voice. It's very, very interesting. It opens up a lot of ethical debates, which they do comment on briefly in the document. However, what Peter has to agree to, it appears to be the only way for them to achieve what is required in terms of humanizing his new cyborg voice. Both a scientist and a healthcare professional myself, I'm always inspired by scientists or STEM professionals in general, and healthcare professionals who use their knowledge and expertise to give them strength in whatever unfortunate conditions, diseases that they face in life, and Peter's story is a loud example of that. Aside from the science, technology and health aspects of the documentary, I found the conversations around Peter's cyborg voice very, very interesting, and also, as I've said already, but the importance of making sure that it sounded like him, and why that was important, not just to him but to his partner and to those who would be around him. I think that's something that was very, very interesting. And conversations around the fact that he is living with a condition, surviving nothing, but they're thriving and living with this, and still contributing effectively to society and to the world. I think it's a very, very important message. Peter had previously met Stephen Hawking, who Stephen Hawking was diagnosed with early onset, a slow progressing form of motor neuron disease many years ago, and that gradually paralyzed him over the decades. Peter mentions a quote along the lines of focusing on what you can do now as opposed to focusing on what you have lost or are losing is a better way of coping. And I believe that concept and that perspective is something that can inspire all of us in our lives and individual experiences. There's also a follow-on podcast called Peter 2.0, The Making of a Cyborg, and I've put details of that in the episode description. I am definitely going to follow his journey, and I hope you will. Interestingly, whilst on the topic of sort of this cyborg technology and neurotechnology, has a company called Neuralink. It's a neurotechnology company which has been developing implantable brain-machine interfaces. The company was founded in 2016 with the goal of creating a wireless brain-machine interface with a hope to cure neurological conditions. And this Friday just gone, so that's Friday the 28th of August, Neuralink gave an update of their progress in this area. And this is where they were launching a new device, which is much smaller than the previous versions. It does not require a visible ear device. It can be implanted in the brain with a surgical robot, all undone under local anesthetic, and is also easily removed. So they had a live stream on Friday, which is very fascinating. It's all available on YouTube. Link will be in the episode description. In this demo, there was an overview of Neuralink and really, the kind of future of it, the where they're at in its development, but also it included a live tech demo involving a pig. They had quite a few pigs there. So there was a pig called Gertrude, I believe, who was showing how the device worked and confirming its potential safety. It's very safe. And then there was the other pig, Dorothy. There were other pigs. There were quite a few pigs, but then there was another pig called Dorothy who was happy, alive and well, and was evidence that Dorothy had had the Neuralink implanted and had it taken out. So this was proof that somebody could have the implant implanted and then have it taken out and they would be fine. So really check that out. And it just seemed very timely, that this documentary came out and then this thing happened on Friday. So I'm really glad that I'm able to kind of have this discussion on Monday Science. Hopefully from this review, you're interested in watching the documentary. Please, if you do watch it, let me know what you think. Have a lovely rest of the day and enjoy the rest of the week. Thank you so much.
You've been listening to the Monday Science Podcast, a weekly show bringing you the latest research and news in science, technology, medicine, and health. We hope you've gotten some useful and thought-provoking info from the show, and we hope you had fun along the way. We know we did. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, hook up with us on our website at www.mondaysciencepodcast.com. Shoot us an email at info@mondaysciencepodcast.com. Find us on Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube at Monday Science, and access episode summaries at mondayscience.medium.com. See you next week on the Monday Science Podcast.